Buenas a todos, chavales. Otro viernes más. El Star Citizen Live. En este caso, pues nos habla de Weapons and Props.
Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live Weapons and Props and Johnny Jasivius. Oh my. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take about an hour out of the end of our week and we hang out with our developers and we answer questions from you, the Star Citizen backer. Before we get to the questions, before we jump right into it, let's go around the table, introduce everybody because every show is somebody's first show. And so we'll start immediately to my right here.
Van a introducir como siempre al equipo.
Last few years, which is why I'm here today.
All right, welcome to the show, Johnny. Ben. Last 6 months, you've been on here like 3 times, I think. Who are you? What do you do for Star Citizen?
So I'm Ben Curtis. I am the art director for ships, but more importantly today, weapons, and dabbled in props in the past.
All right. Jake, no stranger to SCL. Who are you and what do you do?
Bueno, ahí estamos.
I'm Jake Taylor, and I'm
Estamos.
a weapons artist. I make all the weapons that you see. Well, not all of them, but some of them.
Some of them? All right, so when people are like, this weapon, I don't like the look of this weapon, they can just send their letters to you?
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. David, who are you? What do you do for Star Citizen?
I'm also a weapon artist, senior weapon artist at Comentado Games, and I also do weapons. The ones that Jake don't do.
I appreciate how low slung your camera is. When I switched to your main camera, your mouth was hidden behind the graphics, so we'll have to watch out for that. There you go.
Yeah.
And then there's last but certainly not least, Corey. Who are you? What do you do? And what's your favorite color?
I'm Corey Bamford. I'm the lead prop artist at Cloud Imperium Games. I also help out with the weapons guys. I mostly manage the team at the moment, but I've had a history of making boxes. As you can see behind me, they're not all mine, but this is a selection for you.
We maybe get you to tilt your camera down a little bit.
I did that on purpose. Sorry, I was trying to wind you up.
Nope. There we go. All right. So those are some of the esteemed members of our weapons and props team. We are taking questions live from the chat, everybody. If you preface your question with the word question in capital letters surrounded by brackets, that's going to help us pull it out. I will say that everybody here is from the weapon and props art and content team. So with the exception of Johnny, he's...
Bueno, están diciendo que con excepción de uno que es un diseñador, la mayoría de la gente que está aquí es para arte de armas y props. Así que si vamos a hacer preguntas, pues a través de Spectrum, a través de lo que es entre brackets question, a través de Twitch, pues tiene que ser relacionado con el tema, claro.
Feature stuff is a different show. Keep in mind, also, when we selected the questions from Spectrum, noticed a lot of them seemed armor related. Like folks didn't. So some folks may be confused. Armor is a function of the character team, not the prop and weapon team. So I would have thought that was obvious, but there was quite a few of them in the thread, so we're going to point that out. All right, so we're going to start right off the bat with one of the most voted up questions. Johnny, you said you're working on medical stuff right now. What can you tell us about medical tools?
¿Qué nos puede decir acerca de herramientas médicas?
Yeah, sure. So I can start us off at least. So yeah, we are currently working on medical gameplay, and the plan. So I won't go too deep into the feature work, but the things that we are releasing alongside that, or want to release alongside that, are the multi-tool attachment and the standalone medical tool. So the multi-tool attachment is a bit simpler in its use. Essentially, you'll get a lot of the information that you'll be getting given on the dedicated tool, but all you're really going to be able to action from that is heal someone, like kind of in the traditional way that a med pen might do now. But you will also get the additional information that tells you what long-term injuries someone might have sustained. So you're able to at least go like, oh, I've got additional medicine in my bag. I'll be able to deal with that. Or it'll be like, hey, you need to go to a hospital because you can't walk anymore, although that might be a bit obvious without the tool. But yeah, it's a much simpler version. And then the medical tool itself is a lot more advanced. So the gel or the goop that we've been calling internally, inside that we can purpose it toward healing different aspects of your injuries. So you could do the exact same thing that you'd be doing with the multi-tool. So you can just go pure healing if someone's taken a...
Vale, están comentando de que por un lado estaría la multitool, que la multitool sería una versión sencilla y luego habría una herramienta dedicada para lo que sería curar. Y entonces, claro, pues la herramienta avanzada, o sea, a diferencia de la multitool sí te mostraría, o sea, sería como un medpen normal y corriente, pero además te mostraría información del paciente, de cuál puede ser su estado actual o de si va a necesitar ir a un hospital. O sea, te da más información, pero no puede hacer las cosas que podría hacer la multitool dedicada, que podría, entre otras cosas, si no eres capaz de caminar, aliviar el dolor de alguna manera. O sea, que es más una herramienta más compleja, ¿no?
The multi-tool attachment was shown.
Aparte de otras más cosas, ¿no?
Art folks, where do you start designing a gun that can heal people?
I can take this one. I mean, I was modeling it, but well, it's the concept artists who come up with the designs of it. So they're the ones who are creating all like the lovely creative designs, and then they hand them over to us, and it's our job to put them into Maya and create them and get them engine ready. And so they work for the animators, do a bit of rigging as well here and there. We've also been doing a lot of kind of wear and dirt as well. So any new weapons have that. So they're all ready to go with that as well.
I think we have a question about that later on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the kind of, I guess, the visual challenges from making like the multi-tools like is the jack of all trades, isn't it? Like it does a bit of everything, whereas the standalone medical, when we call it the standalone medical weapon, but it's only called a weapon because it's handled by the weapons team and you hold it like a weapon, if you know what I mean. So I think there, obviously visually the manufacturer that's making it is it's got a much sleeker kind of aesthetic to it, and I guess it makes it look a little bit more welcoming. I do remember having some...
Claro, están comentando de que a la hora de diseñar el arma para curar, que en realidad pues solo se puede considerar un arma porque quizás venga desarrollada del equipo de armas y sí, se parece a un arma y tal, pero han tratado de la hora de darle ese aspecto, ese diseño, hacer que tenga un diseño como que sea más bienvenido, más amigable, que sepas que no te están apuntando con un bazooka en la cabeza, no, que te van a curar.
There to help is kind of one of the things, and I think the like Jay says, the concept turned out great. The assets turned out like really nice in game, so it should be a good one.
I think it's very kind of like you say, very sleek and clean, right? So that's a huge part that informs the design. Is that kind of clinical nature of it.
Gotcha. Next question is about some process stuff. How has the process of the weapons and props changed over the years in terms of the requirements that are needed now?
Vale. ¿Cómo han ido cambiando los procesos de creación de armas y props a lo largo del tiempo con respecto a lo que se necesitaba antes y lo que se necesita ahora?
I'll start on the weapon side. I think one of the things that has kind of improved over the years, or not necessarily improved over the years, but changed over the years, is that we try and kind of invest a little bit more time in the kind of concept phase, like kind of Jake's already mentioned, but to try and make sure that we're solving all the kind of like the visual.
Dice que una de las cosas que ha cambiado es que ahora mismo tardan más tiempo o dedican más tiempo a lo que es la fase de concepto para tratar de resolver los posibles problemas de visual o otros problemas relacionados ya en la fase de concepto, ¿no?
The development team, the guys that are actually like delivering the asset, if there's not changes in the direction during the process of that, if possible, there's always going to be challenges. Yeah, if possible, there's always going to be like challenges and things that you need to resolve when the concepts come in, because they never, you don't see the concepts in the player's hand, and you're not running around with it, and until you get to that point, you don't know exactly. Like, it can be the prettiest weapon in the world, and then you get it in the character's hands, you're like, doesn't quite look how I expected it. And we're doing things. Concept kind of take care of that, and they do a lot.
Claro, dice que a veces puedes diseñar un arma que parezca el arma más bonita del mundo y luego cuando la veas en la mano que no es lo que da la sensación de lo que no era lo esperado. Pues eso le dedica más tiempo al concepto, ¿no?
And I think that's probably the other change that we've tried to make, at least kind of more recently, is that we now try and front load as much of the kind of like the setup work as we can in the pipeline, so that we're not taking an asset to a kind of final asset and then it gets handed over to the other department. The kind of like the makeup of the team has changed slightly, so we're working much closer with design and animation to make sure that it's getting, as soon as the concept comes in, the art, like David and Jake kind of try and get that in game as quickly as possible. It might look a bit rough, but it gets the idea in game and lets people play with it.
Yeah, like we would talk with the animators quite a lot now. I think that's probably the team we're like the closest with in terms of how often we're talking with them. Like we'll get that block.
Bueno, una de las cosas que han cambiado bastante es que ahora también, otra de las cosas que han cambiado, que nuevas, es que ahora hablan directamente con el equipo de animación para poder realizar las armas y para que no salga un truñel, así traduciéndolo rápido. Y que de esa manera pues que consiga un resultado más eficiente
Kind of changes
en la producción, ¿no?
design, quite surprisingly. So yeah, and that's really beneficial of the new kind of pipeline that we've got and any changes that we've made.
I think metrics are probably one of the biggest changes for every content team, not just weapons and props as the game progresses.
Ya dices, hablando con las métricas, probablemente haya sido uno de los mayores cambios que hemos encontrado para todos los equipos, incluido lo que es el cuerpo de la mujer, que es lo que está comentando aquí, el cuerpo femenino, que tiene unas dimensiones distintas al hombre.
A little bit, so you have the grip a little bit more towards the character, so the arm doesn't stretch too far to the front, and I think just things like that we didn't think about earlier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the key is as well, it's like the process keeps changing as we go. Like Dave said, like you had the female rig, add some more steps in the process. You add attachments, you've then got to make sure you do all the attachments work and all the attachments checks as you go as part of the pipeline. And then for the future stuff like magazine stripping, like now got to think about the process and how that changes going forward. So it's constantly evolving and updating based off how the game changes.
Está diciendo de que al principio pues estábamos sobre las armas, luego vinieron los accesorios, luego el tema de descargar o destripar los cargadores para las balas y demás, que el proceso está, o sea, que estamos en constante evolución, dice, ¿no?
Consider just dressing. You could kind of consider, it's going to be carryable. It might have, power. It might have, it might have certain features associated with it. So we've kind of, there are instances where we've created these assets, purely as an art content team, we've created them as dressing, and then we're having to retroactively, as new features come online, we have to consider how those impact our kind of existing assets. We're a lot more conscious of getting ahead of the curve now than we were 5 years ago when it comes to, okay, I'm creating a new asset, there aren't any existing ones, let's make a template for it, make sure it gets signed off by the relevant departments. We're creating a usable and existing asset, let's corral our library of assets and kind of, review them, make sure they, if there is inconsistencies, making sure we're correcting those. Basically, I think also just considering how to make things more scalable.
And also, there's a bit of like one of those elements of, especially with the props, is that you dress an environment and then you get a designer or someone running around that environment and they're like, oh, actually be really cool if this asset would do X, Y, or Z, or I could do a mission here and we could have, whatever functionality we might then need. And it's like, yeah, cool. I just thought it was a bin, but okay, if we need to, if we need to add, support additional things, or like I say, the kind of like the things that we could do if we had the time to do them, like everything can function. But it's about kind of seeing, what's the most important missions and that sort of stuff. But I do, a lot of it, like I say, you get from just getting in the environment, running around, oh, this would be really cool, and then that, gets added to the, can we have this feature, please? And on the list it goes.
You can answer almost every Star Citizen question with the word priorities.
Yep.
Bueno, están comentando de que el equipo de props, que luego, pues a la hora de... Vale, están respondiendo a la pregunta de Link Weapons. Dejadme que mire esto primero.
Basically, it's something that we really, really want to do, and obviously we plan on doing at some point. But I think I may have said this before. Essentially, we're trying to build out our more standard set of weapons first. So everything you'd basically expect to see in an FPS game, all of the tools available. You want your anti-vehicle weapons, LMGs,
Vale, estaban comentando antes sobre el tema de los props y demás, de cómo revestir una habitación, de que, bueno, pues que tratan de hacer los objetos que luego pues sean escalables o tratar de poder tener una librería a la que poder revisar y corregir si hay algún tipo de fallo en los objetos. Y luego también el hecho de que cuando hacen objetos pues tratan de tener la posibilidad de, bueno, cuando hacen props, ¿no? Tratan de la posibilidad de que, bueno, pues de repente pues un diseñador dice, guau, pues estaría muy guapo si este objeto se utilizase para tal misión o tal cosa, ¿no? eh, Comenta el desarrollador que es increíble la cantidad de cosas que se podrían hacer si tuvieran el tiempo, ¿no? Pero al final que es una cuestión de prioridades y tienen que valorar lo que es el hacer primero los props para las misiones, Escuadrón 42, por ejemplo, ¿no? Darle prioridad en ese sentido. Lo que está comentando ahora sobre las armas Alien, dice que, bueno, primero necesita pues hacer lo que sería necesitan tener una gama básica de armas estándar antes de poder dar el paso a esas armas Alien, ¿no? Y luego pues hablar con el equipo de efectos especiales, con el lore, con todo Dios para poder hacer las armas Alien, ¿no?
Are they moving fast enough? Do you want to get your hands on some alien weapons?
Definitely not fast enough. We want to do more weapons, right, Jake?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really do. Like with the alien weapons, they're quite like complex and they're much more organic in their form. So I think they'll be more challenging, but that's kind of part of the fun of it, really. So yeah, I like to do some
Está
more.
comentando de que las armas Alien serán algo más orgánico y será un reto más importante, un reto más gordo para ellos para trabajarlas y que es parte de la diversión, ¿no? Del hacer algo pues así, un arma Alien, ¿no? Algo diferente.
Is massive, and it's like JJ says, at the moment we've kind of got our focus, and as we tick off all of that stuff, and we get to kind of explore the new stuff, especially when we start exploring the other systems. Not committing to the next system's going to be an alien system, but what I'm saying is that as we do a game with as many star systems in it that we're looking to deliver, if it was all human, personally, if it was all human, I can see Jared looking at me being like, "What's he going to say?" Personally, I feel that like
I survived last week, so I'm bulletproof. Go ahead.
From my point of view, there's scope for so much variation, not just alien, but advanced tech and
stylistically, with like ultra modern stuff, there's a lot of room to explore, I think.
Yeah,
but this is like story driven, so the further we go with the story, the more we can explore things like aliens and alien technology.
Just tap up David for...
Claro, está comentando de que eso, el tema de que el universo sería muy aburrido si no hubiera cosas alien y tal, y que también es parte de esa sensación de exploración. Y comenta el compañero de abajo a la derecha de que sería de que al final vale. De que al final pues es una cuestión de cómo se va conduciendo la historia y a medida que sepamos más de la historia pues aparecerán más armas o más objetos alien en escena, ¿no? Y otra de las preguntas que están haciendo es ¿por qué no hay cuero en las armas si no les gusta el cuero? No sé. La cara de Discolando es un poema.
To keep it back on track, again, I think that kind of comes down to the manufacturers and the brands that we've currently kind of established so far. A lot of our stuff is military, and a lot of it is kind of dictated by its functionality over its necessarily its forms. But I think as you kind of branch into the less military specific weapon manufacturers and more into the civilian or the collectibles or the rarer stuff, that's where you start to experiment a little bit more with the kind of materials that are used. But I think that there's lots of opportunities for other materials to be used.
Dice que hay otras oportunidades para materiales para usar para el mundo civil y demás, pero bueno, que... A ver, yo supongo que lo del cuero, hay algunas culatas que sé que tienen movidas de cuero y demás, o cinchas de cuero para lo que es el arma, pero no sé.
Yeah, it's that kind of office synthetic leather, I guess, right? So there's a lot of that kind of furnishing. Yeah.
Ben, that is your one, by the way.
Oh, did I swear?
No, that's counting as your swear.
Oh, okay.
That's counting as your one swear that you get for the show. In fact, for that, I'm going to give you a hard one next. Any discussion about bringing the paint and skin system from ships to weapons?
Yes.
In short, yeah.
No, so
Lots of discussions, definitely.
yeah, it's something we're actually kind of like discussing a lot at the moment. How we want to be able to scale the weapons pipeline to kind of fulfill what we think the amount of kind of variation we require.
Le acabo de preguntar de tipos de munición, que sí, por favor. Explosiva, penetración, yo qué sé.
Ships as well, so I've been learning a lot about how that system is kind of working, and I think it'd be a huge benefit to the weapons pipeline to be supporting that as well. I don't think it, in its current form, I don't think it necessarily
O sea,
delivers
balas,
everything that we...
balas que tengan penetración o trazadoras o no sé, tiene... Por favor. Pero no sé yo si... Claro.
At the moment is definitely, you know, me and JJ kind of every kind of like month or two, JJ's like, well, we're up to a skins, Ben. When are we going to do the conversion? I'm like, we'll get to it. But it's, I think it's going to get us a lot of variation and allow us to do a lot with our kind of existing weapons and our existing tech. But if we want to go down the real customized weapons, which visually we've not explored internally properly yet, as crazy as that sounds, you know, we haven't kind of really defined that, okay, here's our you know, run-of-the-mill weapons, here's our, you know, much more customized weapons that the you know, have been, I guess, more unique weapons. And it's really defining what we want that to be, whether or not we want it to be, okay, yeah, you can change a few colors, or you can, you know, change the materials from, you know, plastic to leather, if you really want to, or whether or not it's, no, I've gone to a shop somewhere and I've had a you know, real unique piece of artwork put on the side of my weapon, or, you know, you see so much of like weapon engravings and things like that, how people really care about these things, and it's how much of that we want to incorporate into the system, and that's what we haven't kind of ticked off yet.
Yeah, and to be clear, we kind of want this same system across both ships and weapons, but also we're trying to keep in the loop with the character team as well, because we obviously want a one unified system.
Bueno, están diciendo de que pues en el futuro de personalizar bastante lo que es la apariencia de las armas, que todavía no han llegado a ese nivel, ¿no? De poder cambiar incluso los materiales o las piezas, supongo, de las armas, que todavía no han llegado a plantearse eso.
But I'll ask the question just in case there's more information. Will weapons and tools see visible wear and tear over time?
Yeah, as far as I know, that's the plan. We're certainly going to have wear and tear on our FPS weapons. To an extent, we can already implement some of that right now, so we were able to affect the weapon stats and stuff as wear would go down. We just kind of need the underlying system that works with it. So like, what causes the wear and tear, and then where are we going to go and get that fixed, if providing that you want to take care of your weapon as well. So that's something we're definitely going to get to, and what something we want to do. And it goes to the same things like, you know, like the multi-tool and the medical tool as well. If you don't take proper care of it, you'll see the efficiency rates go down. You might even start to misfire. You might have problems with the battery. You have to take it out and clean it, put it back in, stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely something that's
Bueno, están hablando de los fallos y demás, de las armas, de que las armas se produzcan fallos, hay que se encasquille algo o tal, pero que están trabajando en ello, y definitivamente pues hará, si no se hace un correcto uso de las armas, pues que también pues acabarán fastidiándose más, ¿no? Todo el tema de, bueno, supongo que si sobrecalentamos un arma en el futuro, pues pasará... se estropeará antes o algo de esto, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, dice que también para lo que es la multitool y demás herramientas, que también sufrirán este tipo de defectos.
Take the weather effects. Folks are running around with their armor completely covered in snow and stuff.
¿Por qué las armas no consiguen los efectos de clima, que se vean nevadas o...?
What's going
It's
on there?
very much related. I mean, it's kind of the same kind of answer for that question, but there's a lot of reasons why. Like company-wide, the whole kind of idea of wear and dirt is not unified, and it depends how it's being done.
Aparte de que las armas se supone que cuando se vayan ensuciando funcionarán peor. O sea, eso habrá que verlo, pero lo van a ir implementando, ¿no?
Best as we can, in the sense that now part of the pipeline is making sure that we have those WDA maps and those blends there and ready. So when the system is in place, a lot of those guns we can just tick on and they're ready to go.
Yeah. I think it's largely just down to the stuff we've seen so far is, I think it's safe to say, fairly experimental. There's not, you know, I can't really cast checks on behalf of the graphics team. I think there's work to be done in terms of like buying specific wear that's a larger system, really. I think that's kind of that's
Claro, están hablando de los efectos climáticos, de por qué no se aplican a las armas y bueno, porque ves toda la armadura y tal, que bueno, que parece ser que lo que, para ser justos, dice, lo que estamos viendo ahora es solo una experimentación del equipo de efectos especiales y que hay trabajo en ser realizado todavía para que se pueda aplicar a otros sistemas, en este caso como puede ser las armas, ¿no?
Brought into the engine and the way the engine kind of uses that data is very different depending on if it is a character or if it is a weapon or a static prop. Or yeah, it's all just 3D geometry, but each one of those things has its own kind of individual pipeline and technical limitations. And the it's the character team got their stuff working, and that was like the initial kind of push to get that kind of tech in there, but it's not rolled across to the other teams yet, as far as I'm aware.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and there's plenty of kind of hurdles to come across, really, isn't there? I mean, like, one as an example, like you could drive the wear up on a weapon, the entity, and it will work. Like you'll see that being driven up, but any attachments, they won't. They'll stay pristine, and that's just one of the many things that kind of will need to be worked on, and we are working on.
Following up on the connections between armors and weapons and stuff, this next question says, we have neon or glowy bits on our clothing and armors, but none on our weapons. What gives?
I can think of two.
I think we have a couple of glowy bits on
the
especially
Gemini
the
weapons.
Gemini weapons, the blue
Right.
spinner,
The spinner
and
thing,
the
right.
glowy bits on that SMG that Jake did. Yeah.
Sniper has it too.
Of course, we need to be a little bit careful because it needs to have a certain, purpose when it glows. We can't just put glowy stuff on it because it looks cool. And it needs to make sense that
Shots
it's on
fired,
there.
Jeremiah.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, like.
Están hablando de poner luces o colores en las armas, de por qué no, o sea, cosas brillantes en las armas, poner brillo. Que hay armas que lo tienen, pero las armas no. Y dice que hay algunas armas que sí lo tienen, y es cierto, y que tienen que tener cuidado a la hora de abusar de esos efectos en las armas.
You can see glowy bits inside. We have a lot of stuff like this, for example. Like not all over the place, but where it makes sense, I would say.
Hopeful when we move on to alien weapons too. We should have some nice close stuff on that.
I've heard aliens like glowy bits.
They definitely glow.
They do.
Just straight up Iridian weapons from Borderlands. All right, JJ. Calm yourself. Are there any plans for bigger melee weapons like power swords, chain swords, power fists? It's a Warhammer question.
Why is this towards me? I don't really know why he's
Si hay algún plan para armas más grandes como armas, o sea, espadas sierra o cosas por el estilo.
I don't really have any plans at the moment. We've certainly got nothing set in stone. Right now, it doesn't really fit in with the combat that we're currently pushing for. Like if you end up, especially if we're talking about like a military shooter, are you really going to want to run across a planet surface at someone with a sniper rifle with a giant chainsword? I mean, it sounds very fun, but it's not going to be very practical. So, I mean, at the moment, it's not something that we're focusing on. Like big weapons as well, they'll be taking up like a slot on your backpack.
Claro, dice que aunque parece parecer divertido ir con un hacha enorme dentada corriendo por el campo abierto mientras te está apuntando un sniper, no es lo que se espera de un juego como Star Citizen, que de momento no es prioritario ni tal, y nunca se sabe, ¿no? Pero que de momento no es algo que tenga mucho sentido, ¿no?
But I think it's definitely a case of never say never. Like we never want to say we're never going to do these giant weapons.
Dice que este sería el típico caso de que nunca diríamos nunca, pero bueno, que no es prioridad, ni mucho menos, claro.
I'm going to follow up that question though with another one. What kind of non-lethal weapons would you like to see personally in the game someday?
¿Qué tipo de armas no letales os gustaría ver personalmente en el juego?
I mean, from a feature point of view, we've obviously got electron damage already in. We can kind of pull the levers on that to either be lethal or go full stun essentially and knock someone out. Or we've even got the idea of blunt force actually doing stun damage as well with the melee combat. So personally, like, it ties in really well. We could certainly do something like a taser-like weapon that purely does electron damage that will basically knock someone out unconscious and allow them to be captured.
Let's go ahead and expand the question. Either non-lethal weapons or melee weapons. What would you guys like to see?
Shot gloves.
Shot.
Bueno, dice que
internally
las armas que le gustaría ver para que aturdiesen, aparte de las típicas que nos dicen siempre, lo del taser y tal, dice que le gustaría ver guantes que tuvieran, que electrificaran, ¿no?
first person perspective, and that's where most games cheat a little bit from the perspective where it's like right in front of your face basically, and that's not how you hold a weapon.
Yeah.
And we need to also make sure that it looks good in third person,
right,
from the outside, you know. And that's also one thing that's really that you need to a problem that you need to solve basically when doing such weapons.
Yeah, you know, we've got the toy pistols, and they're technically a non-lethal weapon. I'd love to expand it. Just saying.
We worked hard to get those. We worked hard to get those in, Ben.
I know, I had to get them in somewhere.
You can just imagine Ben disabling my ship, kicking the door down, and coming in with his toy pistol, just firing little foam darts at me. Oh no! I give up.
I had an 18-month window where I was shepherding the subscriber program, and I was like, as long as I'm in there, we're getting crap like that. So
yeah, and I think I guess, you know, non-lethal. I don't know. For me, I kind of feel like what I'd love anyway is anything should be a weapon. It's something I keep on wanging on about to the feature team. Like if I'm in a bar and there's bottles, tick, weapon. You know, if you're in your ship and in engineering and there's tools, weapon. Like it shouldn't.
Claro, dice que lo que le gustaría es, me gusta cómo piensa este tío, pero tela. Lo que le molaría es que no fuese un arma en concreto, que simplemente si entras en un bar y le quieres cascar un botellazo a alguien en la cabeza, pues ese es un arma no letal. O si quieres, si entras en una sala de ingeniería y encuentras herramientas, pues que las puedes utilizar como armas no letales, ¿no? Que puedes utilizar cualquier cosa de tu entorno para aturdir a un tipo.
Completely squishing them would be quite hilarious.
With all the talk about fire on ISC, are you planning any flamethrowers or advanced fire extinguishers for our future?
So, fire extinguishers definitely.
We have fire extinguisher props already, and having them function would be obviously, you know, good for that system.
Yeah, from the weapon side, we've been thinking about things that we can put out that, you know, someone could take in their loadout. So, like, if they were, for example, playing as part of like a big multi-crew ship, and one of their jobs is essentially to make sure they are literally putting out fires, like running around and dealing with those, then we definitely want someone to have something on them as well as we need to think about the props that we've got in there at the moment. So if someone is completely unprepared, they could just go and grab something and help put it out. Flamethrowers. Obviously, it's been talked about because as soon as anyone mentions fire, flamethrowers come up. But I think at the moment, with there being so many ways to start fires and not very many ways to put them out, we want to focus on the fire extinguishers for now.
Está comentando de los extinguidores o que haya equipo dedicado, que haya un grupo de personas o un par de parte de la tripulación a bordo de una nave grande que se dedique simplemente a extinguir incendios o que esté especializada, pues crear los props para eso sería interesante. Con respecto a crear un lanzallamas, que de momento tienen demasiadas formas de propagar fuego y pocas de extinguirlo, así que de momento se van a centrar en la manera de poder extinguir el fuego antes de centrarse en lo que es hacer un lanzallamas, que sí ha entrado en conversación con todo el tema del fuego, ¿no?
Good question. JJ, I'm not gonna.
I've personally not been working completely directly on the system. Parts of our team have. I've not heard discussion about fire suppression systems being built into ships, but obviously it is built off the room system. So even though you're kind of half joking there, Ben, if you did vent a room full of oxygen, then the fire would in theory go out, unless it's got fuel that can burn without an oxygen supply, essentially. So there are definitely environmental levers that we can pull to, you know, if, say for example, if we, you know, had a petrol can, in theory you could make the fire bigger with that. Or if you like were pouring water on, then obviously the fire would start to douse and go down, like the flames would go down. So don't know if it's being built into ships or space stations, but it's certainly something we could do from a systems side.
It's not being built into ships at the moment. I can
Okay,
say that much.
good.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah.
the moment.
Until
moment.
Ben gets the email that he's dreading.
After this
Thanks,
call,
Rory.
actually. I'm writing it down.
After this call. Let's see. This next question would like to know if Blender is used by the props team and how far it has been implemented into your pipeline, or are you using 3ds Max like a
Bueno, aquí
plug?
es una pregunta técnica
We are
si están
definitely-
utilizando 3D Max o Blender para su trabajo o qué están utilizando, ¿no?
I'll put it this way. There's a lot of artists who are very enthusiastic about Blender and would love to use it on a day-to-day basis. However, we have, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. We have a massive library of scripts and also a custom exporter for our engine that, you know, obviously all of that would need to be ported over before it was something we could consider. I'm not sure how the tool programmers feel about that. Probably they're like, nah, mate. So, you know, there are artists who are very passionate about the use of Blender. I'm not one of them. I'm still a knuckle dragging idiot. But you know, I would love to learn to use Blender. I just don't really have time at the moment. But yeah, basically, not right now. They use it on some of the concept artists use Blender, and they take advantage of, you know, the fact it's got its own PBR engine to like present stuff. It's a very nice workflow for them. As a production workflow, without massive amounts of work from like tools programmers, I couldn't see it, you know, being used day to day. I'm sure.
I think there's also the element of a learning curve for production artists as well. You know, take a week out of one person's schedule is cool. Take a week out of 200 artists' schedule, and all of a sudden you've got a reasonable amount of delays in that.
It's a bit like when people say, why aren't you using a different game engine? And it's like, well, the amount of resources we've invested into our workflows make it very challenging to make such a drastic pivot, to the point where it may be very difficult. I'm sure people will still ask about it though. There still are basically saying, you know, we're interested in this tool or in this program. I personally, I don't see it kind of coming in, but that's not to say there's any reason other than that it would just take a lot of time for programmers.
Don't feel bad, Corey. My training capped out at Bryce 3D way back in the day.
Like on weapons, we use usually Maya, which usually is also a struggle. If you come from Max to Maya, you need to learn a lot, and you know, the same thing would apply for Blender. So if one person has a Blender file and the other person needs to work in that file, they would also need to know the software. And training people and so on, that takes a lot of time. And as Corey said, all the tools need to be converted to the other software, and people need to know everything about it and all the little tricks. And getting one file from one software to the other causes a lot of problems, especially if you consider animations, rigging, and so on. Yeah. And yeah, that's the whole reason behind it, I would say.
What are some of the weirdest inspiration references you've used for weapons and props?
I guess we could say, I don't know, like the turtle that came about because one of the concept artists just drew a tiny thumbnail of a like table or something, and there was a little turtle on it, and we were just like, well, it's in the concept, so we're gonna have to make it now. So we made the turtle.
I think, yeah, like the weirdest. It's a kind of tough one. I mean, I find myself always referencing like the automotive industry for a lot of stuff, I guess, and yeah, I couldn't put my finger on something that stood out as being exceptionally weird. I reference a lot of just general gadgets and electronics and keyboards, and
usually when you want reference, you're kind of referencing something pretty close to what you want, or at least very accurate, be that geometry or materials. You'll be like, oh,
yeah, there's two sort of references there. There's like a visual reference that you're going for, and then there's like the functionality reference that you're going for. So if you're trying to find reference for something that's functional, the best thing you can do is look at how that problem has already been solved, and then what you then need to do is take that core kind of element of, okay, these are the kind of like the core mechanics that I need to use to resolve what I'm trying to do, and then how do I aesthetically make that pleasing and fit the manufacturer or the art style or just in our universe. And those two things kind of go hand in hand. So it might be that you're referencing a great big digger, for some of its kind of like mechanical and mechanical functions, but then you're kind of translating that into like a small little detail that you're using on a weapon or a prop or a ship or whatever it might be. So I think it's, when it comes to reference, it's like there's loads of variation, but like as Jake says, if you're looking for if you're looking at switches and dials because you're adding some switches and dials to the back of an asset, then generally you're looking down into those details.
Can we get an automatic high capacity Nerf rifle?
Love that.
Go on then, say it.
Están hablando un poco simplemente del tema de cómo se desarrolla lo que es un arma o las referencias que pueden utilizar, que simplemente pues pueden utilizar de repente una referencia de una excavadora gigante para poder hacerlo algo a nivel personal, pero a veces se busca algo más concreto y busca una referencia más concreta, como puede ser si tienen que hacer unos diales de algo, pues que a veces pues se centran más en algo que tenga que ver de ese tipo, ¿no? Que las referencias que pillan son de muchas cosas y que se centran también en lo que es el núcleo de lo que quieren hacer y a partir de ahí encajarlo con la marca, con el diseño de la marca y tratar de desarrollar el producto, ¿no?
So we can use them without fear of permanent loss. I'm going to go ahead and jump on that one a little bit. Nothing's been decided about converting them to the skins or the paint systems yet, but as far as the permanent loss, one of the things that we're driving towards is using the reputation system to resolve that issue. Basically, as the reputation system comes online and it gets further developed, one of the things that we're exploring with the sub team in the USPU feature team is to have subscriber vendors in locations, so where you can basically go and reclaim your subscriber items if you've lost them and whatnot. So I think that's how we'd want to address.
Vale, están hablando sobre el tema de las skins y de las armas con skins y de los objetos de los suscriptores. Entonces dice que están resolviendo el tema de para que nosotros como suscriptores podamos recomprar esos objetos que hayamos adquirido en el juego, o sea, que hayamos adquirido para el juego, mediante el sistema de reputaciones podamos tener acceso a esos objetos que nosotros hemos comprado, que están trabajando en eso, ¿no? Así que supongo que pronto pues podremos, si perdemos un objeto de suscriptor, podremos recuperarlo en el juego. De alguna manera.
In being unique, and so like we want to be able to set up the weapons in the same manner completely. So from a technical standpoint, we want the system to be all-encompassing and allow us to do whatever we need to do. The rest of it, what Jared just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
La
I mean,
verdad es que
just to speak
el
quickly
tema de poder comprar los objetos yo creo que ahorraría muchos reseteos de mucha gente, ¿no? Que nos cabreamos a veces en plan de joder, tío, he perdido las armaduras de suscriptor y tal y ahora tengo que resetear para poder tenerlas, ¿no?
you keep the weapon that you've got. You might have had this P4AR for, like 1,000 hours in the game. It's just a weapon, but you might be able to take that to different places and get it resprayed. So if, for example, you did have a subscriber skin available to you through reputation, then even if you lose that weapon, you might be able to go and take another one that you've just bought because you lost all of your other stuff and go and get that resprayed in that same skin. So while I'm not saying that is the plan, that's something that's been thrown around internally at the moment.
What you can take from it is that we have multiple options. We have multiple options to pursue and to explore. And
it's a solvable problem.
It's a solvable problem. It will be solved. It just it has to. It all depends on how it interacts with multiple other game systems. So, all right. Any plans to make props breakable?
¿Algún plan para hacer los props que se pueden romper? O sea, que sean rompibles.
So, sorry, my team's minimized and I was like, not my team, sorry, my Zoom minimized and I was trying to find the unmute button. Yes, there are plans. There is a system for breakable props being worked on by the VFX team. I have no idea how far along that is or when it will make its way into things. We do have
bueno, si no recuerdo mal, le está diciendo que sí que hay planes, pero si no recuerdo mal había ya una sandía que se podía romper en Star Marine. Lo que pasa es que si rompías la sandía en Star Marine o lo disparabas, al explotar crasheaba la partida, ¿no? No sé si os acordáis de eso, que eran en el mapa de Co-11, justo donde estaba la zona del bar de la parte de la bandera de B, pues ahí estaban las sandías, ¿no? Que se podían romper. Creo recordar que sí.
Stuff like that break. We did the fire extinguisher, obviously you shoot it and it vents out stuff. We've got some exploding gas canisters and things like that. It's something we want more because it creates, very fun gameplay. Like I say, there's work on that actual system being done.
And it does usually cause some headaches. At least it hasn't in the past with like the beer bottles, because we had a situation where back when we were using prefabs, one of those found its way into a prefab library, which then populated all around the universe, and nobody kind of really knew. And there was, for some reason, some real big costs on the physics, because there was one bottle that was just, it would never settle. It would constantly tell the physics
Calculating
that
its position.
it needed help, and it caused all kinds of chaos. It was great.
There are plans.
The best intentions sometimes. What's the most exciting object you're working on right now?
¿Cuál es el
Sound like
objeto
you
más
need
Definitely the crossbow for me.
The crossbow.
el objeto más increíble que está trabajando
Yeah,
ahora? Y definitivamente
yeah, I think
la
that's
ballesta,
like-
dice.
I know that has been wanted for a really long time, and when that kind of concept was coming through, I was, I want to do that. Look at it.
Yeah.
I really thought it looked
Dice que
good.
cuando vi el concepto
yeah,
decía,
so far it
yo quiero hacer eso, míralo.
really fun.
En
So,
fin.
yeah, that one's me.
The rig's pretty crazy, right? Because you've got the cam with the strings, and it's like a compound bow, right? So it's quite an intricate mechanism.
Yeah, I guess like look, the reference I was looking at that was like people shooting bows and arrows at like super slow motion.
How does
as
it work?
well. Yeah, like how the hell does this work? Like, how does
Yeah.
a cam work?
Cables are always tricky to do, and that's the biggest challenge of the rig.
It's quite complex in its geo as well. Like there's a dense amount of detail to that. There's like 4 arms to it. Just getting that under the poly count, which ours is quite high naturally because of our custom normal workflow. Just getting that under that highest poly count was pretty tough, while keeping it looking really dense in detail. But I did it, so it's there.
All right. What about anybody else?
Well, I'm working on 2 things that I think we haven't talked about yet, so I better not talk
You
anymore.
mentioned the Vault stuff were all right.
The Volt stuff?
Yeah, that's all right.
That's all right. Yeah, I'm working on that Volt parallax rifle right now, which is also pretty cool and has lots
Para
of
que está
detail
trabajando en un
and
rifle
has the
de
same issues
salto
as
de Volt. Está trabajando en un rifle de salto de Volt, que es rifle de rayos y tal. Que estaba preguntando si estaba bien que hablase de eso, y sí. Ya ha salido imágenes y todo eso en el reporte mensual. Dice que es bastante genial, ¿no?
You got something?
Jared, I'm excited about everything we're doing. And I'm in the very fortunate position where I get to see a lot of it in my day-to-day. So there's nothing in particular, and there's probably a lot of things that I'm not allowed to talk about. So
Dice que está muy contento en general de todo lo que hace y que no hay nada en particular y muchas cosas de las que no no le permiten de hablar, así que a otra cosa.
I don't.
No, I
Sorry.
wasn't. No, I was just gonna. I'm done.
What are you gonna say? Tell me.
No.
Share your feelings.
What? No. What do you got? I was gonna ask you
Okay.
another question.
Oh, another question. So I obviously spend a lot of my time more doing management stuff, making sure the team's all happy and all that. I do sneak in a few assets here and there just because, obviously I'm an artist and I enjoy making artwork. So I do little bits here and there, things like hip flasks, like flare items and stuff that's kind of got it's not really a release task. So, something that's on the back burner. I jump on some of that stuff. So yeah. Hip flask. I did the handcuffs for the Star Runner trailer. So the little jumps. They were really fun. Stuff like that.
So for this next one, it says, "How come Smoltz is advertised as beer, but if you zoom in on the ingredients label on the cans, it's clearly an apple cider? What the fuck?" That's mine. That's my one.
That's your swear for the day. So we spent a lot of time before this call trying to find the Smoltz can, because I was like, nah, mate, the Smoltz doesn't have anything to do with apple cider on it. So I spent ages, trying to find the Smoltz bottle. Smoltz beer bottle just says lager. The texture on it is so illegible that you can't actually read the ingredients. I managed to find a very, very old reference to a Smoltz can that was in the locker from another universe, the Flare locker. And that does indeed say that it has those ingredients in it. So I apologize. I will look to rectify that
Oh, do we leave it or do we change
Están
it?
hablando de
That's
una
the
lata
question.
Yeah, maybe we
de
just
unos
leave it.
ingredientes de
Discard
manzana, de no
contains
sé qué
them.
It is
historia,
a
no entiendo
locker
muy
from
bien de qué
another
va.
universe. Maybe in the other universe,
Yeah.
beer
Here's
The
contains
word
apple
the
cider
word for
in it.
cider is lager. Yeah. No. Yeah. I don't know who did that, but they're very naughty. So I'm sorry.
It was you, wasn't
No, actually, it was.
it?
I think it was technically behavior back in the day.
Mhm.
Do props follow the same 3-step high-end, middle-end, low-end philosophy as environmental art does?
Estaba
Great,
pensando en hacer
definitely
otra
wasn't listening.
pregunta, pero...
No, I'm not gonna
No, no la
ask
voy a
it.
hacer.
Someone else
Venga,
can
no la voy a
answer.
hacer.
I think
Falta
prop
poquito,
follows
falta 50,
environment
falta 10
quite a
minutos.
bit
No
when
la voy a
it
hacer.
comes to the style, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No. We kind of split props into, I guess, location-specific props and then props that are separate from locations. If it's, if we're making a bench for Microtech, it would adhere to that art style. But if we're making generic flashlight that is used everywhere, that would kind of have its own concept, whether it's high tech or low tech. We'd still have like a tech level associated with it, and obviously we'd be pulling in style elements from that. But
Yeah, I guess it's like a yes with like the high tech, low tech, and universal, but due to the nature of props and the variety that we make, it's more of a spectrum than specific categories.
yeah, I guess as well, like
Están preguntando si hay algún tipo de categorías a la hora de realizar un prop, ¿no? Y en plan de... Dice que se pueden categorizar en alta tecnología o baja tecnología, o si son pertenecientes a alguna ubicación, pero realmente como hay mucha variedad de props, pues que el espectro es muy amplio en ese sentido, que no es tan fácil como categorizar tan sencillo un prop, ¿no?
Style of the
Como
environment.
otras cosas.
Yeah. Here's a philosophical question, I suppose. How many weapon manufacturers and their styles are enough for a game like Star Citizen?
It's never enough.
Yeah, basically.
Dice que es como una especie de pregunta filosófica. Dice, ¿cuánta cantidad de marcas o de tipos de armas distintas son suficientes para Star Citizen? Está contestando que nunca es suficiente, ¿no?
We've covered a lot of the more standard and expected weapons you'd see from a game like an on-foot shooter. Not all of them need a new manufacturer. So like I say, we're kind of building out the current families that we've got. But kind of tying that into new manufacturers is kind of like when we were talking about alien weapons earlier. It gives us that opportunity to revisit the tech and go like, is there anything cool and new that we could do with these new manufacturers? So we're not just going to release another bearing. We're not just going to release another Klaus and Werner just because we feel like we want, like another set of laser weapons. I mean, that might happen far-flung in the future, but right now we don't want to kind of just like recycle the same stuff with a new label on it. It's going to be, if there's a new manufacturer, we've done it for a reason. Like Volt, for example, we wanted to make weapons that evolved as they fired, but were also unreliable, and that obviously ties into the aesthetic of them being very look like they've been made in a shed in someone's back garden almost, like all of the wires, like
claro,
all
que
over the place,
está el tema que está diciendo que no quieren reciclar demasiado de lo que han... O sea, no quieren reciclar de lo ya hecho, ¿no? Y un ejemplo de eso sería Volt, que han creado ese fabricante, pues que tiene un nuevo tipo de armas con un nuevo tipo de daño, que son confiables, que tiene toda esa apariencia como... bueno, pues que emite rayos, ¿no?
Have a new feature set or be there for a reason. I'm slightly on the side of I just want pretty things. So if you give me another shotgun that's just a little bit prettier, then what I assess to be pretty, then I think there is still scope for that as well, especially on the scale of the game we're making. We kind of keep saying it that every Star System there's I don't think there's a limit.
No, absolutely.
Bueno, que no hay ningún límite, ya está, vale. Después de todo lo que ha dicho, que no hay ningún límite, pues no, claro que no.
We didn't go crowdfunded. We didn't eschew the normal publishing system to self-impose limits. We'll keep going until we're content.
Just never.
Just never. Just never.
Dice que nunca que la idea desde que fuimos a hacer el crowdfunding, el Kickstarter, que nunca o sistema de financiación que tiene el juego, que nunca no es para nunca para seguir los procesos estándar, ¿no? Que dice que van hasta donde vayan para sentirse contentos, lo cual le contestan ahí por lo bajo que es nunca, ¿no? Que nunca está satisfecho con Que siempre buscan más y más perfección a la hora de trabajar,
Like
¿no?
a Woodstock Kalashnikov.
For pizza, you would definitely get one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all on board with that.
All right. If you send all of us each a pizza, we can make it happen.
It comes down to manufacturers to answer it sensibly. It kind of loops back to the why no leather. Someone's going to prove me wrong that there is a manufacturer out there making military weapons with wooden stocks. I'm sure. I guess there is lots with rifles, but anyway, it comes down to a lot of the manufacturers we've got at the moment are functionality-based manufacturers over form. When we get to the form over functionality manufacturers, the people that are making custom weapons or weapons that are not meant for a battlefield with however many hundreds of thousands of people using them. I think that's where you'll see a bit more experimentation in the materials used.
There's a market for high-end weapons in the universe, but obviously a lot of the manufacturers, based on the fact they're quite, I don't want to say bog standard weapons, but we've got like we're covering our bases in terms of like, the kind of, the more generic weapons like manufacturers, I suppose. They're more like kind of your bread and butter, right? There's obviously more exotic weapons in the game. There's like the explosive pistol, whose name eludes me right now. Very kind of ornate design. Lightning Bolt Company obviously furnished their weapons with quite some interesting stuff. Like
And oh god, Jay.
I was just gonna say it's interesting because it comes out of that conversation between the writers, design, and art, where it's like Lightning Bolt Company, when we were assigning the manufacturer to this type of weapon, fit perfectly in terms of description. But it was also, when you looked at the company, it was actually almost like a Russian-based company that was brought into the future. Like I think even their original logo is like or their description was in like some of it was in Cyrillic even. So it's like that very Russian aesthetic.
We experimented with having the UI solely in Cyrillic, but
yeah,
back and it was like, yeah, it'd be really cool. They're like, no one understands. Like, yeah, it'd be cool.
Bueno, están hablando en general de posibilidades de armas del futuro y que obviamente pues ahora mismo hay como las armas más genéricas, por así decirlo, y que en el futuro pues habrá armas pues de high-end, por así decirlo, armas más pepino. Y está hablando incluso de ha querido medio soltar la posibilidad de que los jugadores lleguen al punto de personalizar armas o fabricar armas. Esto vamos a cogerlo con pinzas porque hay que cogerlo con pinzas. Y bueno, ya iremos viendo eso cómo evoluciona. El tema de... Bueno... Es que esto hay que verlo... ¿Cómo decirlo?
No trees, okay, cool.
Esto hay que verlo con calma y tal, porque...
Like, oh yeah, we're not doing magazines, there's no trees. And they're like, there's planets full of trees. What are you on about? I'm like, well,
are you joking,
why are we not doing like newspapers and magazine stuff? They're like, why would anyone ship one of those across the universe? Think how long it would take and how much it would cost to ship.
No son cromas, chicos, es un efecto que hay de...
Yeah, right, valid. That's a valid argument.
De envidia, me parece, no son cromas.
When it comes to like bespoke weaponry or furniture or like these sort of assets, then it's probably something someone's going to keep and not just throw away instantly.
We're trying to convey an aesthetic at the end of the day, which is quite futuristic, right? It's the same with like the cardboard boxes, for instance. We have a lot of cardboard boxes in the game. They were just like, that's just an asset that was made, quite a while ago. And it's just kind of proliferated since because it was, a box.
Conversation, yeah.
Yeah, it's easy dressing, right? And it's like, then people are like, why would they use cardboard? It's a future where you're kind of, the level of scarcity for resources is, and the refinement of resources is much, more advanced. Why would people still have cardboard boxes? And it's kind of like, well, maybe should we have cardboard boxes? I think there's still, I don't know. I'm sure some people will tell you we shouldn't. Some people will tell you we shouldn't.
If trees are a commodity that you have, then I'm sure there would still be people that would be making cardboard.
Yeah, it's a resource at the end of the day, right? And like plastics and stuff, you need to get it from somewhere. So I guess it depends on what resources you have available.
I'm not sure if Jared's like slowly falling asleep with us talking about this, or whether or not he's like really invested. I can't quite tell.
We do have pizza boxes made of cardboard, also. So
you have to figure 930 years in the future they'd have some kind of synthetic, so they wouldn't need trees.
Look like cardboard.
Yeah, probably 3D printing magazines and books out of some kind of resin polymer. That's it, guys. That's the show. I was just letting you go because you were wrapping it up. I just curious. Sometimes I just like to see the world burn, and I wanted to see where you'd go. It is a perennial challenge for me to be the forward face responsible person of the company, and then work with my own personal nature of just wanting to just wreck everything and subvert it all. So I like you guys. I can just sit there and just let you do it, and I'm like, and when I get in trouble when they come after me, I'm like, they did it, not me.
Said him that bad, did we?
No.
Okay,
We'll talk about one of your comments earlier. All right, guys, that's it. That's the show. Thank you so much for taking the time. JJ, Ben,
I meant
Jake,
the leather belt. I'm just
David,
saying.
Corey.
No, se está despidiendo de todos y tal. Dice que es muy difícil ser la cara de la compañía de Cloud Imperium Games cuando a nivel personal tienes que lidiar con querer romperlo todo. Está de coña, supongo, pero...
Is live right now on servers. Check that out. It's a first of its kind for Star Citizens going on right now. Be sure you jump in and take a look. For everybody else, I'm Jared Huckabee, and we'll see you all next week, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Bueno, pues
guys.
ahí está el temita,
Bye.
chicos.
Oh, I didn't use my swear word.
Oh fuck.
Me neither.
Nos vamos al live, chavales. La verdad que bueno, en esta ocasión, este episodio ha sido tranquilito, relajado. No hay mucho que contar. Y bueno, pues vamos al lío. Ahora vengo.